all discussed having live replay review on your networks or on your games?
We have internally. We want to focus on the work to get things right. We'll continue that conversation. You don't always have to be the first mover. We've done some things first, right? And that's one where it's interesting to learn. I think we actually watched a couple of clips after week 1 and learned some things from what they're doing, and we'll see what that means in the future. We do what we want to do it as best as we can, and make sure it doesn't interfere with decision making, because the core of what happens in replay is to officiate the game.
Greg, you just had CFP meetings the last couple of days, and Rich said maybe staying at 12 is something that could potentially happen. Just what are your thoughts coming off of those and where things are headed?
Yeah, the CFP meetings were Wednesday morning, so we had 4 hours, which, 4 hours is a long time, but given the number of issues, not enough time probably. I said during media days, I think that one of the possibilities is we could remain at 12. In fact, there is a format. There seems to be confusion that there is no format next season. There is. It's 12 games. It's the 5 highest rated conference champions and the other 7 teams. We've introduced ideas. We've tried to keep our ideas focused. We came out of Destin, focused on 16, wanting to see some improvement in the evaluative process. There's been some progress there. We want to continue to pay attention to it. We'll continue in the conversation about the size, but I think the rationale has to be very clear. We have to make the kind of evaluations of that we did with 12, which is what's the impact on the regular season. I think, with what we've done with 12, you saw last year, and even this year, it draws people in without taking the focus away from the regular season. Hey, anybody's going to get in. So I think we want to exercise care there. When you think about dates around expansion, where do you play those games on the calendar? Obviously, if you go to some of the larger numbers, you're changing conference championship game realities that has an economic impact. Those things have to be well thought out. So I think there's a lot there that's probably not apparent. Can we make a decision other than the 12 that we have? We could, but I think it's important to understand 12 exists, and if there isn't some agreement on change, then we'll do great. We're on the 12-team playoff.
Well, if you're having these athletic directors potentially set up a working group when you're getting this closer to December 1st, does that kind of indicate that you are a long way off?
Yeah, that's an outside idea. I love our athletics directors, love that they talk, but there's specific responsibilities for making decisions. We've heard all of the ideas. Again, I want to go back to the evaluation of those ideas. The rationale is really important. I think you've heard me say any number of times, I'm not a fan of this automatic bids. In fact, even with 12, I just take the best 12. That political compromise, I was a bit of a lone voice. And so some of the numbers of how many automatic bids, why, what are the differences versus just leaving whatever the bracket number is open for selection, those are important issues that can't be lost. And athletics directors have been talking. We've had a couple meetings with the Big Ten that have been helpful. I'm certain athletics directors will continue to talk, but we have to have really good rationale, really good understandings if we're going to make a change from where we are in the CFP.
Greg, how have your thoughts evolved on subjective versus objective in that process, and is there any objective way you could get to not having a committee anymore?
Well, you'd make allocations, I think, in some way. If it was just no committee, we're going to put you in, or do we go back to the computer rankings? I guess those would be the 2 objective standards. And as the generational change happens, it's easy to forget. We had the computer rankings, people got left out, then we need humans, so we pivoted. What I've thought, and I think I said this probably in Atlanta, or it may have been Destin, but I talk too much, is all we can know, was I think the pendulum swung away from use of data to the selection committee. You've seen a little bit of a swing back, and someplace in the middle, to me, between subjective and objective in the current environment would make the most sense. But that's without a lot of definition. So yeah, I could have a conversation about both, but you have to dig in to think about the impact of both as you make those decisions.
Roy says he's got an idea. It's called BCS.
I've had, when I called Roy about like the 12 teams, I didn't get a warm embrace. And, you know, what's amazing is, I think he turns 95, and those conversations are still as sharp as ever. And he's been great for me to call, and have a conversation or two. It reminds you, and I miss Mike. I mean, it's been 7+ years since we lost Mike's live. When you don't sit in the chair, your mind, your view changes pretty quickly, but, yeah, he did do that. The legendary stoplight vision, right? You've heard this one. But pretty remarkable guy. I felt that back in my Southland days.
I do have a question, actually.
Oh, I thought that was.
But, you don't have a big body of work, obviously, just the 1 year at 12, but do you have a sense, Greg, what the likelihood is at 12 that you get a 3-loss team in?
We were close last year. If you hadn't had an ACC champion outside the top 12, you would have had that. And I spoke to that in media days last year, that when you looked at Georgia's schedule last year, the three of their 4 conference road games, nobody had that on their schedule. Now, what that did was provide the number 2 seed through that test, if you will, for the University of Georgia with 2 losses and some great wins. So I think even what you saw with our schedule introduction this week, teams will lose, but they have this ability to accumulate such quality wins, plus the expectation of a quality non-conference opponent. Yeah, I could see that for sure, and I think we were pretty close last year. I may have viewed it differently, respect the committee's decision, but had you not pulled a team in or outside the top 12, you would have had a 3-loss team.
John Cohen put out a statement a few days ago about the officiating in the Oklahoma game. Have you spoken to John Cohen, Auburn leadership, just in the aftermath of that game?
Yes, repeatedly. Yep. Statement, I think, was pretty clear that that moment didn't meet the expectations that exist for us. No excuses. We have to meet that moment. And we set out through our video communication process to our officials and our coaches, clarity on both expectations, and expanding our horizons when asking questions and when understanding what's taking place. So, yeah, plenty of communication.
Do you think that statement was fair for them to put out on Thursday?
They made that decision. I was involved. I was in DC all day, and I know our staff worked for that. And John and I have talked since, and we're going to turn the page, and we're going to try to fulfill our responsibility in a game that has movement, disguising of plays. A lot of things happen. You know, one of the things in college is you can line up, as I recall, in a formation that's not legal at the time of snap, unlike the NFL. I think one of the things the rules committee has to start looking at is how do you write rules that can be more effectively officiated. I think that's missed. There's so many points of input in the college football rules playing process. I'll also introduce what I shared with our membership in February, and that is my view that my view that we can expand the use of replay through a coach's challenge to certain objective issues, formation issues. So we had an error last year in a game that resulted in an illegal touching call. The hideout plays that could be subject to that. So those are 2 that we've experienced. I think even the face mask play might be subject because it's such a bang moment. It's so dependent on the alleyways of vision. I think those are reasonable and important conversations as we think about how technology is used and how we balance what is a responsibility for every play to stop compared to coaches engaging through that challenge system like we see in other sports. I think there's something to that needs to be more deeply explored.
Greg, when the league addresses a blown call with a crew, is it more educational or more disciplinary? And is there a good argument for some transparency with the public on what that looks like?
Well, here's what happens. You know, we have officials dedicated to the game. They're educated and they're receptive to education continually. You know, you can have a quarterback throw an interception that's returned for a touchdown, they come back in the next play. You can have somebody miss an assignment, gives up a sack, they come in for the next play. That goes on and on and on through the game. We've explained publicly our system for evaluation and oversight. We've also said, just like internal team discipline, we're not going to make that a communication publicly. There's a lot of harassment around people that takes place, a lot of criticism. We have now a threat monitoring service that we subscribe to, because our officials on the field are committed to getting it right in a really difficult circumstance. What's troubling is to read what comes out of those reports. Doxing. We've had officials whose work phone system is basically non-functional on a Monday or Tuesday because fans find information and use it. Those are high-level concerns. We've done well in oversight. We've done well in our evaluation process. When things go wrong, that's part of the evaluation process. But you know, a football game's a big picture of a lot of things that happen, and I think the focus has to be on that big picture, and we have to respect officials who are challenged every day to get it right.
Greg, Alabama's playing here for the first time since 2015. How important was it to rectify frequency of these games on campuses in the new scheduling model?
If you go back in the history of the SEC, I think there were like 40 years they didn't play at all for a period of time, because I read a book about it this summer that I tweeted about. And so even your citation is much more frequent than the long-term history of the SEC. When we started in 18 thinking about scheduling, one of the ideas was, how can we move teams through our cities more frequently? So that's an agreement with the premise of your question. And then we expanded. Right off the bat, it was, how do we move these big brands? How do we move all of our teams through our communities more frequently? And you saw that play out. So whether it's here or the fact that, you know, every other year, all of our teams will play each other. Every 4 years, our fans will see them in their home community at least once. I think that's an indication that we've adjusted from the long gaps between teams playing on our campuses.
Any idea why a 20-team model would suddenly be floated when you guys are this close to the finish line?
As I've said, let's go back to the Mike Leach 64-team model. So I think there's a lot of ideas out there.
Is that intentional?
When you
think?
go, that one hasn't landed on my desk. I don't know. I'll go back to the regular season, and what happens in college football is incredibly important. I'm one who thinks, and I had visits with some of your colleagues last year at this time, and they'd say, oh, this 12-team thing. I was in Tuscaloosa, remember the meeting, you said, it just doesn't feel the same. Now, those of you who were at that game, that was a pretty remarkable evening, and it had an impact on the season. When you start to go further, you need to understand the broad impacts of that decision on the regular season, on access. Where do you play the games? You know, the schedule's tight right now. I know, you know, we're overlapping the NFL, which isn't terribly popular in certain parts of the country. You need some breaks for recovery and preparation. That's part of what informed the 12-team model, and that was a lot of work. So I understand the ideas, but they have to be based on the same kind of thoughtful effort that we put into the 12-team recommendation. Because again, whether it's preparation, regular season, decisions, to Dan's question about objective or subjective, postseason, where you play those games, how many games are played, when you end the season, what that means for people's opportunities, and then how you prepare for what's next, whether it's the draft or the next season. There's a lot of tonnage in that decision making.
Is there any scenario where you would give up the championship game?
That's like a broad question. That's essentially a hypothetical. Like, if they did this, would you do that?
Right.
We're focused on having a championship game. I've never been on the stage of one of our championships where someone said, I'm really bummed we played this game. So.
In your ideal world, is it 12 teams and no automatic qualifiers?
Well, I've said, I think I'm accountable for, we have an agreement that the 5 conference champions are gonna be there, so my ideal is out the window.
Right.
Whatever, I was an advocate for all at-large selections. My view is you've seen kind of the shifts in college football conference